Ethan stood at the edge of the balcony staring out at the alien city before him. The sky was painted in hues of purple and blue, and towering buildings stretched into the heavens, their glass walls shimmering like jewels. The world of the Xylari was both stunning and overwhelming. It was beautiful, but it was not home. His heart longed for Earth, the planet he had left behind, and despite the grandeur of the city, he felt like a stranger in a land that wasn't his own. He had been sent here on a diplomatic mission, part of a crew tasked with negotiating a trade agreement between humanity and the Xylari Empire. It was a chance to expand human influence in the galaxy, and Ethan, though a skilled diplomat, had never been comfortable with the politics that came with his position. But this was different. This time, things were complicated. The princess had caught his eye from the moment he arrived. Princess Zara, the youngest daughter of the Xylari Queen, was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her beauty was legendary, her intelligence vast, and her presence commanding. Yet it was her power that made Ethan uneasy. She was the future of her people, the one they all looked to for guidance. And despite her charm, despite her grace, Ethan wanted nothing to do with her. She had tried to engage with him on multiple occasions, but each time he had found a way to avoid her. Whether it was feigning exhaustion or getting caught up in the details of the mission, he had always found an excuse to keep his distance. It wasn't that he didn't respect her. Far from it. It was just that he couldn't shake the feeling that he was a pawn in a game much larger than himself. He sighed and ran a hand through his dark hair. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind him. He turned, his eyes meeting the gaze of Princess Zara. She stood there, her long silver hair cascading down her back like a waterfall, her violet eyes studying him intently. She wore a simple but elegant dress that highlighted her graceful figure. She was beautiful, no doubt about it. But there was something more to her, something that made Ethan uncomfortable. "You've been avoiding me," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. He had been trying so hard not to make eye contact with her, to remain focused on the tasks at hand, but now her words hung in the air like a challenge, one he wasn't sure how to meet. He had hoped that, over time, his distance would go unnoticed, but clearly he had been mistaken. "I've been busy," Ethan replied, his voice betraying the lie. He could tell by the look on her face that she didn't believe him. Zara stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "I don't believe that! We've all been busy!" "But you've been avoiding me specifically. Why?" Her question was direct, and Ethan found himself at a loss for words. He wasn't used to this. He had been trained to handle political situations, to navigate complex negotiations and delicate alliances. But this was personal. And for the first time since he had arrived on this planet, Ethan felt exposed. He turned his gaze back to the city below, trying to gather his thoughts. "I'm not avoiding you," he said quietly. I don't think I belong here. I'm a human among an entire empire of beings who are so much more powerful than I am. I don't know how to be a part of that."
"I don't know how to fit in." Zara was silent for a moment, her eyes narrowing as if she was studying him.
Ethan could feel her gaze on him, intense and searching. "I see," she said at last, her voice softening. "So it's not me you're avoiding, it's the entire situation." Ethan nodded. "Yes. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be here, in this foreign place, trying to negotiate something that will affect the lives of billions. I'm just one man. And I'm not enough." Zara's expression softened, but only for a moment. She stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the stone floor. "You're wrong, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "You are more than enough." Ethan looked at her in surprise. Her words were unexpected, and he wasn't sure how to respond. He didn't feel like enough. He felt small, insignificant, a mere speck in the grand scheme of things. He had always been told that he was important, that his role mattered. But in this place, surrounded by beings who were centuries ahead of humanity in both technology and wisdom, he didn't feel it. He didn't feel special. He felt like an imposter. "You don't understand," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "You're the princess. You're powerful, you're brilliant, and everyone here adores you. You have a destiny, a future that is already written. And I'm just a human who is sent here to make sure nothing goes wrong. I'm not a hero. I'm not important." Zara looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Ethan could feel the weight of her gaze, the way she was silently processing his words. Finally, she spoke. "You think I don't have a choice in my future?" she asked softly, a hint of sadness in her voice. "You think my life is so easy, so perfectly laid out in front of me? You're wrong." Ethan was taken aback. "What do you mean?" Zara's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You're not the only one who feels trapped by their circumstances. You're not the only one who has to follow a path that others have set for you. I may be a princess, but that doesn't mean I'm free. I have responsibilities, expectations. My life is not my own, and every time I try to carve my own path, I am reminded that I am just another piece in a larger game." Ethan was silent. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected her to reveal anything so personal. But as she spoke, he realized that their worlds, despite their differences, were not so dissimilar. They were both trying to find their place in a universe that seemed far too large and far too complicated. Zara took a step closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. Ethan flinched, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he allowed her touch to linger. "Don't think you're alone in this," she said quietly. "You're not the only one struggling with the weight of your responsibilities. I may be the princess, but I am also a person, just like you." "I'm not invincible. I don't have all the answers. But I know that we can help each other find them." Ethan stared at her, his heart racing. This was not the Zara he had expected. This wasn't the princess who had commanded respect and admiration from everyone around her. This was someone vulnerable, someone who understood what it was like to feel lost. And for the first time since he had arrived on this planet, Ethan felt like he wasn't alone. He looked into her eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't deserve this," he said. "You don't deserve to feel trapped by the expectations of others." Zara smiled, her expression softening. "Neither do you." The words hung in the air between them, the quiet realization that despite everything that separated them, they both shared a common struggle. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. The days that followed Ethan's conversation with Zara were filled with silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of avoidance. Instead, it was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken bond forming as they continued their separate duties. Ethan had thought that their brief conversation would leave things unsettled, but in a way it had brought him peace. He no longer felt the pressure to constantly escape her presence. Instead, he found himself more aware of her, watching her from afar, noting the small details that he hadn't before. Zara, for her part, seemed to have accepted his answer. She didn't pursue him anymore, didn't try to corner him at every gathering. There was no longer an expectation that he would engage with her. But as the days passed, Ethan noticed a change in the way the Xylari people treated him. He no longer felt like a tool to be used in the political games between their worlds. It was as if Zara's shift in perspective had rippled through her people, and they too had begun to see him as more than just a negotiator. It was a subtle change, but it was there. One evening, as the sun set behind the glass towers of the palace, Ethan found himself once again on the balcony, his mind wandering as he watched the stars beginning to twinkle in the deepening sky. He had been thinking about Earth a lot lately, about what awaited him back home. There was a part of him that longed to return, to leave behind the complexities of Xylari politics and the weight of the responsibilities that had been thrust upon him. But the other part of him, the part that had grown more aware of Zara, found himself unable to completely let go of the idea of what could be. There was something about her, something raw and real, that made him wonder if this strange world might offer more than just a political alliance. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps. He turned to see Zara approaching, her silver hair glowing in the fading light, her expression unreadable. She was dressed simply tonight without the usual elaborate gowns or regal attire, but she still commanded attention. The air around her seemed to shift, her presence unmistakable. "You're here again," she said, her voice light but carrying a note of curiosity. "I was beginning to think you might be avoiding me again." Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile he had given her in a long time. "No, just thinking." Zara raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. She stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away from him. "Thinking about what?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to reveal. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made him decide to be honest. "About how I don't belong here," he admitted. "And how, despite everything, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing." Zara's eyes softened, her expression growing more thoughtful. "You still feel out of place?" Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Every day, this place, this world, it's so different from anything I've ever known. And it feels like there's always something I'm missing, something I'm not seeing. I've spent so much of my life trying to make sense of things back home. And now I'm here, trying to make sense of a new world that doesn't even know what sense means."
Zara stood silently beside him for a moment, her fingers lightly brushing the railing.
"I understand," she said quietly. "Sometimes I feel the same way." "It's not easy being born into a life that's already set for you. People think they know who I am, what I should be, but they don't understand what it's like to carry that weight. They don't understand how hard it is to be constantly watched, constantly judged for every move you make." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. He had never heard her speak this openly, this honestly, and it made him wonder if perhaps she had been struggling with her own doubts all along. "I never realized," he said softly, "how much you have to carry. I thought it was all just privilege, power. But it seems like there's a lot more to it than that." Zara looked at him, her gaze intense. "It's more than power. It's expectations, obligations, the constant pressure to be perfect, to always be the one who leads, who decides, who doesn't falter. But nobody tells you what to do when you feel like you can't meet those expectations. No one tells you how to deal with the fear of failure when you're supposed to be untouchable." Her words echoed in Ethan's mind. He had always seen Zara as the perfect princess, the one who had it all: beauty, intelligence, authority. But now he was starting to see the cracks in the facade. She wasn't just a symbol of power, she was a person, one who was as uncertain about her place in the world as he was. They stood in silence for a few moments, each lost in their thoughts. The stars above them twinkled in the vastness of space, a reminder that, no matter how large their worlds felt, they were both just tiny pieces in a much bigger puzzle. Finally, Zara spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I don't want to be alone in this anymore, Ethan. I've been alone for so long. I've never really had anyone to talk to who wasn't trying to use me for something. And I know we come from different worlds, from different lives. But maybe we could help each other." Ethan turned to face her fully now, surprised by the raw honesty in her voice. He had expected her to be distant, to return to her role as the untouchable princess. But instead, she was offering something more. She was offering a connection, an understanding. "You want to help each other?" he asked, his voice uncertain but intrigued. Zara nodded slowly.
"Yes. I think we both need it."
"We're both outsiders here, in our own ways. But that doesn't mean we have to be alone." Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. It wasn't a romantic gesture. Not yet. It was something deeper, something more genuine. The walls between them had crumbled, if only slightly. And for the first time since he had arrived on this planet, Ethan didn't feel so lost. There was someone here who understood, someone who was willing to see him for who he was, not for what he represented. "I've never really had anyone to talk to either," he admitted. "Not like this. I've been surrounded by people my whole life, but I've always felt like I was standing on the outside, looking in. But with you, it's different. I feel like I can breathe for once." Zara smiled, a small but sincere smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe that's what we need, a chance to breathe." They stood together in the quiet of the night, the stars watching over them. The weight of their respective worlds, their responsibilities, seemed a little lighter now, shared between them in the silence. Ethan didn't know where this connection would lead. He didn't know if it would last or if it was just a fleeting moment in time. But for the first time, he felt like he was starting to find his place, starting to understand what it meant to be part of something bigger. And for that, he was willing to take a chance. Zara glanced at him again, her smile lingering. "Maybe we're not so different after all." Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "Maybe we're not." And in that moment, under the vast sky, surrounded by the weight of a galaxy that seemed so far from home, they both knew that they had found something rare, understanding, and the beginning of something new. The days grew warmer, and the tension between Ethan and Zara slowly started to melt away. What had begun as an awkward encounter on the balcony had now turned into something unexpected, a quiet companionship. They spoke more often, not just about politics or their roles, but about themselves. They shared small moments, casual conversations, and even laughter that they hadn't anticipated. Ethan found himself thinking about Zara more often. She was no longer just the princess. She was someone who had become real to him, someone with worries, fears, and dreams. It was strange, in a way, to think of her as a person instead of a symbol of power. Her vulnerability had opened a door that Ethan hadn't expected to find. He could now see beyond her crown and her status. Zara, for her part, seemed to be more at ease around him as well. The walls she had built to protect herself were slowly crumbling, piece by piece. She no longer felt the weight of her title pressing down on her every time she spoke with him. For the first time in her life, she could talk freely without the fear of being judged or manipulated. She didn't have to be perfect around him, and that was a relief. One afternoon, they met in the palace gardens. The sun was high, casting golden light over the vibrant flowers that filled the space. The scent of blooming roses and sweet jasmine filled the air, creating a peaceful atmosphere. They sat on a stone bench, side by side, just enjoying the quiet. It was a rare moment of calm in a world that seemed to be moving at a pace far too fast for either of them to keep up with. Ethan looked over at Zara, who was absent-mindedly picking at the grass, her fingers moving thoughtfully. She had told him once that she liked the simple things, the things that didn't require her to be anyone other than herself. Sitting here in the garden, it felt as though they were just two people. No titles, no expectations, just a quiet moment together. "I've been thinking about Earth," Ethan said after a long pause, his voice breaking the silence. Zara looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "Earth?" she repeated, her brow furrowing slightly. "What is it like there?" Ethan smiled, the memories of his home filling his mind.
"It's different. It's a place full of contradictions."
"Some parts are beautiful, peaceful even, and then there are parts that are harsh, unforgiving. But it's my home. I grew up there, and it's all I know." Zara nodded slowly. It must be strange for you, being here, so far from everything familiar. It is, Ethan admitted, his gaze drifting to the sky above them. But it's also been eye-opening. I never imagined I would be in a place like this. A place where everything is so different, so much more advanced, so much more complex. You think Earth is simple? Zara asked, her voice tinged with amusement. We may have technology and power, but that doesn't mean our world is any less complicated. Maybe, but Earth is, simpler in some ways. People there still fight over land, over resources. They struggle with things that seem so small, but they're huge to them. It's hard to explain. Zara thought for a moment. I understand. We fight over things here too. The difference is that our struggles are often hidden behind the veil of power and tradition. Our wars are fought in boardrooms and council chambers, not in the streets. But the pain is still there. The cost of it is just harder to see. Her words surprised him. Zara, the princess, the future queen of the Xylari, had just admitted something he hadn't expected. The weight of her people's history, their battles, their complex relationships with other species, had never seemed so real. She wasn't just a ruler. She was a person, burdened by the same complexities that existed in his own world. I never realized it, Ethan said softly, turning to face her. I always saw you as someone who had it all figured out, someone who could command, who could lead. But now, I see that you're just like me. You're just trying to make sense of it all. Zara met his gaze, her eyes reflecting a depth he hadn't fully understood before. We all have to make sense of the world, Ethan. No one has all the answers, not even me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling between them. Ethan felt as though he had learned more about Zara in these past few days than he had in the entire time he had spent on Xylari. She wasn't the untouchable figure he had once thought she was. She was a woman, struggling with the same questions, the same uncertainties that he had. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Zara turned to him again. There's something I need to ask you, Ethan. He looked at her, intrigued by the seriousness in her tone. What is it? I want to know more about your world, she said quietly. About the people there, about your experiences. I've heard stories, of course, but I want to hear it from you. I want to understand. Ethan was taken aback by her request. He had never expected Zara to be so interested in his world, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just curiosity. She wanted to connect with him. She wanted to understand his life, just as he was beginning to understand hers. Of course, Ethan replied. I can tell you about Earth, about my life there. I'll tell you everything. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, their conversation flowing easily. Ethan spoke about his childhood, about the cities he had grown up in, the struggles of living on Earth, and the joys he had found in simple things. Zara listened intently, asking questions, offering her own thoughts and insights. They shared stories of their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt truly seen. Zara wasn't just listening to him because it was her duty. She was listening because she wanted to. And that meant more than he had ever expected. As the evening drew to a close, Zara stood, stretching her arms above her head. I have to go, she said with a sigh. I have a meeting with the council, and I can't be late. But thank you, Ethan. Thank you for sharing that with me. Ethan nodded, standing as well. Anytime, Zara. I mean it. She gave him a soft smile, one that held more warmth than he had ever seen from her. I'm glad we talked. I feel like I know you better now. I feel the same way, Ethan replied, his voice quiet but sincere. As Zara walked away, her steps slow and graceful, Ethan couldn't help but feel a shift inside himself. Their connection was still new, still fragile, but it was growing stronger every day. He wasn't sure what the future held, what the outcome of their relationship would be, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what might happen. He was simply grateful for the bond they had started to form. And as the sun set behind the palace, casting long shadows across the garden, Ethan realized that he was no longer just a human in an alien world. He was someone who had found a place, a purpose, and maybe, just maybe, a person he could trust.